I believed so full force in my dreams and in my success that even though I didn't have a ton of money or a business, essentially, I was just starting. I also, when I first moved into her, in my mind, it was always a temporary situation. It was like 2 weeks and I'm out. Like I just gave myself very fast timelines. And so I was also looking once I got there for like apartments I could move into closer to my business that I was opening. And so I guess we've always just had a little bit of a difference of like viewpoints on like lifestyle. And so, the house that I moved into with her, like it just wasn't the house that like I wanted to live in, like, and it wasn't the house she wanted to live in, but, it was a very, I don't know, poor house. I don't know how to describe it. It wasn't ideal for either of us. But for me, I was like, space has always been really important and like feeling good in your space. And so
to be able to think,
yeah, like
be able to have dreams,
exactly.
be comfortable. Yeah.
So I found this little apartment in South Tampa, which South Tampa is like the most expensive part of Tampa, but it was very close to my business. And I think it was only like $700 or $800 a month. It was actually very cheap in perspective, but at the time that was a lot, right? But I was like, I know I can make this work. And so I didn't have good credit at the time. I messed up my credit when I moved to LA and just bought my family gifts on credit cards. And then I didn't know you had to like pay it off every month. I just thought a credit card was like, you pay it off when you can one day. So my credit was horrible. I was just starting a business. I had like no income statements, right, to get this place. But I told the landlord my dream and what I was doing, and I sold him on it. I was like, this is what I'm starting this business. It's going to be amazing. And he actually let me like sign a lease, which was incredible with no credit and no income. And 2 months in to my business and 2 months I literally moved out from my mom's house within 2 weeks. And 2 months later, I'm crying, stressed out because I can't afford it. I can't afford both. My business rent at the time was $600 and my
business bills and personal bills.
Personal rent was only $800, right? But like it was just too much. And so I was looking for a part-time job at the time. I was like, let me just, as much as I didn't want to be a waitress or a waiter, work at a restaurant, I like needed it at the time, some sort of consistency. And so I moved back home with my mom after the first 2 months. And then he tried to sue me because I was breaking the lease. And he was so mad that he believed in me and I let him down so soon. Maybe it wasn't that I let him down, but that maybe he didn't do his due diligence, right? It was nice that he believed in me, but that kind of sucked.
All right, moved back home and you wanted to move out of that location, right?
Yes, eventually, but I wasn't there yet. And so was the question initially, and was I listening to anything?
Yeah, at this point in time, were you listening to anything?
Yeah. So when I moved back home with my mom the second time,
right,
which I still had to pay her rent because, she was also struggling at this time. So it wasn't like I could just move back with her and it was rent free. It was just a little bit less. Maybe it was like $500 instead of $800, right? She gave me on my drive, I was on my drive to work every day, which was now in 45 minutes. She gave me Tony Robbins CDs to start listening to. So I started to listen to them about mindset and about success and business a little bit. It didn't fully click, but it clicked enough for me to like do certain things, to like know that I need to get through this and one day I'll be successful, right? Like this hard season is normal.
All right. From a business standpoint, how much are you making at this point in time and how old are you?
Okay, so I'm 23, my first year in business in this little location. So the first year, once I moved back with my mom, I lived with her for the first year, right? Gotcha. At the end of my first year, and granted, when I was driving 45 minutes, there was days where I'd have one client at like 9 a.m. and one client at 6. But I would have hours in between.
I want to touch on that too, because I'm sure some people listening are dealing with that, right? You got gaps in your schedule. What were you doing to maximize the time How did you get over the fear of thinking, oh, well, maybe I should just get a part-time job?
Well, my mom was telling me this all the time. She's like, you'll be happier, you'll make more money, you should just get a job. And
Yeah.
even though she like wanted to believe in me, and she did in a sense, but she was also like, I think there was fearful for her kid
She
that
didn't see where this was going.
yeah. And so just when I'd have hours in between clients, I would research on Google other successful waxing salons. And I would see like these, maybe they were older than me, but like youngish women, and they'd have teams. And I'm like, okay, if they can have multiple locations and have teams that are booked out, like I know that I can do this like for myself. And so I honestly think it was truly caring about every single client and taking not advantage of every client, but really making sure that every single client I saw came back over and over and over again. And so a lot of us, like, not that we take clients for granted, but it can happen when you get busy, right? But in the beginning, like I literally, every client was like my lifeline, right?
Yeah.
So I had to make sure that everything was amazing. And it worked because I went from the beginning was very slow and I had to move back, with my mom. And then by the end of the first year, I finished at a $65,000 a year, which I thought was amazing. I was never made that, or maybe I did when I was working for someone else, but that was, amazing starting with 0 clients. And I didn't have, a hairstylist to like spread the word.
Right.
So I was really happy about that. And then I decided I was ready to move into this storefront location that I had been manifesting that was down the street. And so every day when I would drive to my little sketchy room, I would pass this really cute like retail space that was right on the corner, a busy corner, and there was a stoplight. So there's a ton of retail, stores on Kennedy, but there was specifically this one that was at a stoplight, so you had to look at it when you stopped. And I wanted that so bad. And by the time my lease was up in my room, I just called the number in the front. They always have their number up. And I called them and I asked if they had anything available. And he said, I do have something available, but it's a half a suite. So most of his locations were 1,200 square feet. That unit was 600. And I was like, that's perfect. I'll take it. And so I was able to move after my first year in business into this storefront location. My mom's neighbor, rebuilt houses, would remodel houses. And I knew him because I'd go to my mom's house, even once, I was still living at my mom's house. That's what it was. So I would see him out. He was remodeling the house next to my mom. And so one day I just asked him, I was like, do you think you could come see my new business and give me a quote on how much it would be to remodel my business? And him and his dad came and he was like, sure. And so they helped me remodel that first location. And in 600 square feet, we got 2 rooms, a little reception, and a tiny storage room out of that. And at the time, it was my dream. It was so cute. It totally matched the vision I had always had. I was so grateful for that space. And so that was my first storefront.
How did you get past the negative talk from family? As far as maybe you should get a job, right? Mm-hmm. Or
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that was mostly in the first year, right? When I was in that location. And I did get a job. I did apply, I eventually I was like, maybe they're right. Maybe I need something part-time. And so I got a job at a restaurant as a hostess at night.
Is this when you also applied to work at a strip club?
Yes. Yes. Okay. So the other advice that Janelle gave me from the Spray Tan Boutique that told me to invest in a website, she also gave me the advice that not that I should be a stripper, but that I should apply to work at a strip club as a waitress or whatever.
The hostess, waitress.
Yeah, because I'd get really good tips. Mm. So I did apply, but I think one, I didn't get the job, but 2, as soon as I went in there, I hate the smell of cigarettes. And so it smelled like cigs. So I was like, this isn't for me. But I got a job at a restaurant as a hostess. And what happened was, and this was maybe for a month, I was doing it at nights and then on the weekends. And on the weekends, what would happen is my phone would ring while I was at the hostess stand. And at the hostess stand, I was making $8 an hour. and my phone would ring. I'd miss the call. I'd listen to the message, and it'd be like, hey, I'm looking to book a brow wax. And a brow wax at the time was $15. And in my head, I was just like, man, I'm standing here for $8 an hour and I'm missing a $15 phone call essentially, but not just one time, but multiple times over because I know I can keep my clients.
So just to put it into perspective, so it's $8 an hour what you're making at the job, and you're missing a $15 $15 minutes. Yeah, that's why I say it's 15 minutes as well. So
it was
at
almost
that time, like your an hour of your time was really $60 compared to the
but I didn't look at it in that sense. I was just looking at it. It didn't click in that way, but it clicked enough to be like, every client counts. Yeah. And if I'm missing these clients that could turn into lifetime clients that could eventually book Brazilians and other things, like the only way to grow my business is to be all in. And so I think I was there a month before I quit that job.
Go all in.
So I was getting the feedback from people to get a job, and I did, but I, at that point at least, had realized like, no, I'm all in on this thing. And that's when it really took off.
All right. So you're listening to Tony Robbins tapes at this time. At what point did you first say, all right, I'm going to make the investment into myself to learn from him in person, or to, instead of just consuming the free content, I'm going to actually make the investment. I didn't go to college, right? But although I didn't go to college, I could still have mentors.
Yeah.
When was that?
Well, that was actually not until a couple years later. And so, you know, when things are good, like sometimes like you don't do the things that you don't feel like you need it, right? Like if like things were going good at this point, I had just moved into the storefront. I just hired my first waxer. I was so busy and I knew I always wanted to have a team and help. And so I had just hired my first waxer. I just got a puppy. I just had moved down the street into what I thought was like my first, like the best apartment I had ever lived in. And at the time it was like $1,000 a month. And I was like in heaven. I was like, this is amazing, you know? And I was so excited. Like life was good. And then 2 months before my lease was up at the storefront, I get a letter from my landlord saying that I cannot renew. And so puppy, employee, apartment, now I have all these responsibilities, right? In my mind. And it was like the most devastating letter I had ever gotten because everything was great. Like, how can I just get kicked out? And so I think I called him. I had him come in. I cried to his face, like, you can't, like, this is my business. You can't kick me out. Like, I just put all this money and work into this. And so what I learned from that was, you know, when I first signed for that, I only signed for a 1-year lease. You know, I didn't even think about signing for a longer lease because I assumed you'd be able to be the first one to renew it once you're in there. And that's not the case. So I didn't have a clause in that for first right to renew. And so he legally could kick me out. And so, and there was no, you know, crying didn't help. None of that helped with like an old man that just cares about real estate and making, you know, that's his business.
Right.
And the unit next door wanted to expand, and they wanted to expand into my location, and they were also friends. So there was just no winning in that situation, even though I was a great tenant. And so that was the time. So I went from this high of like, I did it my first year. By that time, I had my first 6-figure year in the second year of business in this location. So I went from this high to a complete like dark night of the soul because now I have no idea what
am I going to do?
Because even though, and anyone knows this that has been in business and invested in a business, especially a storefront, you reinvest so much of that money, right? And especially that I also moved into an apartment and all these other things, hired an employee. I made 6 figures, but I didn't have much money, right? I didn't have $50,000 or $30,000 cash laying around. Yeah. And I had such a great deal on that location. Every other place in Tampa was like triple the price. And so at this time, I started listening again to Tony Robbins. And now I started listening to people on YouTube as well, like Les Brown. And podcasting had just become a thing, right? Like Lewis House had just launched the School of Greatness maybe a year before. And so what happened was I remember Tony Robbins And I was like, let me see if I can find something like an interview with him. And so I type it into podcast, and an interview with Lewis Howes and Tony comes up. And that changed my life in so many ways because it got me into podcasts. It got me into the School of Greatness and started binge listening to his interviews. And back in the day, like he really...
What year was this?
This was 2015. So 2 years into business.
9 years ago.
And so 2015. And so I'm starting to brainwash myself with listening to successful people, but also I listened to the show called Entrepreneurs on Fire. And in that show, every interview that he does, he asks entrepreneurs that were currently successful what their rock bottom moment in business was. And every single one had a rock bottom moment. And so what that taught me was, wow, every single entrepreneur goes through a dark night of the soul, goes through a rock bottom moment. And if I can get through this, because I definitely contemplated quitting, if I could get through this, one day I will be massively successful. So I have no other choice, right? Because the contemplation was, maybe I'll be happier if I do get a job. Maybe it'll be less stressful, less pressure. I feel like I'm running in circles by reinvesting, right? I had my business 2 years and everything went back into the business. And now I have to do it again, but I don't have the money to like do it at the next level. But if I was going to keep going, I wanted to get a bigger location because I didn't want to move again. To move in 2 years, like 3 times in 2 years was a lot.
Yeah.
And so after brainwashing myself for a while and trying to figure it out at the same time, I decided that I was going to keep going. And I found a location that was 3 times the size, 3 times the rent, and a $30,000 build out when I didn't have that kind of money. But I was so, I was listening to School of Greatness like at 3 a.m. every night because I'd wake up in like sweats of like what to do. And he'd always talk about, being grateful for things before they happen and acting as if it happened before. So I found this location. It had like a card. I don't know what they're called, like a realtor card. And I put it on my vision board that I had in my apartment. And I wrote, "This is the future flirt wax bar." And through resourcefulness and renegotiating with the landlord about the build out, getting help from friends, I was able to land that location and get them to pay $20,000 of the build out, the landlords, because I signed a longer lease. And now I knew what to put in the lease and what to look for. And I couldn't afford both rents. I couldn't afford to pay my current rent and pay for this new place at the same time. So I stopped paying the mean landlord and I only paid the nice landlord. And then what happened was it took much longer. It didn't take 2 months. It took like 5 months. And so now I'm not only not paying my current landlord, I am now getting charged double rent because I didn't move out by the time the lease is up. And now for some reason, he can charge double rent.
Now, you, through resourcefulness, get this new location. You're only paying the good landlord, not the bad landlord. Yeah. I'm sure that goes left, or you have to handle that at a different date, right? As far as not paying him.
Yeah.
Moving into the new location, what was your vision? How did you want to build it out? How was that process?
Yeah. It was very surreal by the time it was done because I thought the other location was my dream location. But when I had built out and moved into this one, which now had a huge reception, 5 rooms, like it was beautiful. And I realized like, this is my dream location. And I did this and I made this happen. And as hard as it was, I still had that. It's like, I saw the vision coming to life and I had like, honestly, like gratitude, not for being kicked out, but gratitude that now this is like my business. But just because you move into your dream location and build out your dream location, things don't just become easy right away, right?
Correct.
So now I had something that was 3 times the rent and 5 rooms when there was only 2 of us. And it was really hard in the beginning. It was a struggle to keep up. There was many times where I remember even calling a bigger wax franchise and asking if they would want to buy the business like very early on because it was just a lot. And so I was still at this time, I was struggling financially to keep up. I knew I needed to add something to bring more revenue in the door. Like waxing alone wasn't cutting it, or at least with the two of us, it wasn't cutting it. And I was struggling personally, and I was, I just still wasn't happy. It was like I was happy I had this location, but outside of that, everything else I had almost become like numb to. The landlord tried to sue me for the back rent, which I also didn't, have. And I was just going through a lot. So I almost became like numb to emotions because I just didn't know how else to handle it. And so although I was listening to all these like amazing interviews every night, which really helped me get through those tough times, when life really changed, it was when I decided to take a leap of faith and I knew I needed help. I was like, listening is great, but like I need something more, right? Free content could get you so far, but one of my clients at the time was like, I just got back from a Tony Robbins event. I told her about Tony Robbins and I couldn't afford to go, but she went and she came back and was like, Raya, it's life-changing. I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to start my coaching business. You have to go. And it wasn't until months later that I was able to go. And it was so terrifying. It was $1,000, but I had to fly all the way to California, flight, hotel, all these things, take a week off work. And that was hands down the best decision of my life besides starting a business at the time. It was a personal development event. And I came back from that event and I hired a receptionist. I grew the business. And I saw a direct correlation between personal development and my business growth and my mindset. And all of a sudden I was happy again. And what I didn't share was also at this time right before I was seeing a therapist for eating disorder.
Right.
We didn't really get, I said the eating problems came more when I moved to Florida. And so, which wasn't working. And I came back and I was just like happy for the first time in such a long time. And so the business started growing. I started hiring more people. And because I saw that correlation so fast, I invested in the next event, which was $5,000, which was a lot. Like it was like at the time, everything, I kept reinvesting everything I would make as it grew into the next event because I knew in my heart, like I needed it.
Help me understand the shift that was happening.
Yeah.
When you would go to these events, what shift occurred for you mentally to inject into the business, for you personally dealing with the weight issues or what you thought were weight issues?
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Like our minds are just so powerful. Like they're more powerful than any of us can even like comprehend, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a few things. One is there's people out there that have been where you are and people who have gotten through it. And sometimes when all we know or all that's around us is like proof of your limited vision, right? Like your limited ability in terms of like, well, I grew up this way. This is the most that I can do. This is where I am. So like, how on earth could I build a 7-figure business? Because I have no proof around me. And so when you start hanging out and investing to learn from the people that have done it, that maybe started at the bottom, started broke just like you, and now they have accomplished those things, not only does it give you the shortcut to success, but it shows you that it's possible. And when you see it's possible, not only from one person, but the people you're surrounded with, which was like everyone, I had never been around people like that, like so happy, so fulfilled, so on fire. Like you start automatically, it raises like your vibration. It raises your energy. It raises everything, your standards, everything about you changes. And so, but I think the biggest thing was the path and the belief in the possibility. Because once you have the belief that you know you can do it and you know it's possible, now I just have to implement. And so I'd come back and I would take action on what I learned, which was huge. And And then I would reinvest and it would be more expensive. And now the next one was 5,000. Also a personal development event, nothing about business. But there was such a direct correlation. I grew again. And then the first time I invested in the business event, which was 10,000, not only, did my business grow a little bit, it grew dramatically. It grew from, 300,000 a year to over 700,000 that year. It grew from me being in the treatment room, taking clients all day, every day, to me taking myself out of the treatment room and being able to really be the owner and the CEO of the business, to traveling the world while it was still making, it was the best $10,000 I ever invested, and the scariest at the time. That was my whole savings account at the time. But sometimes you come to a point where you just know you need help.
Yeah, you need
and
more.
The investment not only gives you better help and better experience and better mentorship, but it gives you the proximity, the community. It gives you so much more than you'll ever spend.
Yeah.
Right.
It's funny because I keep referring back to conversations that we've had or that I've had with our students. And one of our students was talking about, okay, I'm going to hire my first employee. And she was talking about the fear behind it. But I was letting her know that, if once you hire your first employee, we're not going to give you an award, right?
Yeah.
If you look around the community, the people that she talks to the most within the community also have hired 2, 3, 4 employees, and they're doing very well. And so when you're in a community like that, and you, like you said, when you see it and it's on fire and the momentum and
forces you to
level up. It forces you to level up. And by the end of the conversation, she said, I know I have no choice but to hire. And I believe it was either that night or the next day, she texted me saying she put out the Indeed ad already.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and I hear the similarities, like the shifts and the changes from a community. Like when you say that you got from being with Tony Robbins, and it's very similar to what we have with our program.
Well, the thing was, I was this young owner of a waxing microblading salon, and I was hanging out. I was 26, I think, at this time. And I was hanging out with millionaires. And I was learning, not even just from the mentor, but the people I was surrounding myself with. And so, you become who you hang out with. You become the people you hang out with the most. And that was who I was surrounding myself with. And at this time, because I think everything, happens for a reason. And because I was going through the eating disorder and the body dysmorphia and all these things, I wasn't going out. I wasn't partying. I was so solely focused on the business. And I really didn't have many friends in Tampa. So now these are my friends, and they're very high level friends to surround yourself with.
And even if you can't afford to go to an event, whether you knew it or not, whether it was Lewis Howes, Tony Robbins, you were listening on tape, Les Brown, they almost become mentors, secret mentors and friends of yours.
1,000%. Yeah, that was who I was hanging out with all the time.
Yeah.
For sure. Eric Thomas was a huge. He was homeless eating out of trash cans, and now he is building $1 billion empire at the time, multimillionaire, traveling the world. And to me, I was like, wow, if he can do it from homeless to multimillionaire, who am I not to do it?
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot more we can add into this. But we should probably do another interview like this for the rest of your story, for the members of this upcoming round of BBB.
Mm-hmm.
A few last questions. Looking back at the story, would you change anything about it? If you could.
No, not a single thing. Because at the time, it's so hard when you're going through it at the time. Like, I don't even think me explaining really explains like the amount of stress I was under, to the point where I truly believe, you know, that same year that I went to that business event, I also got diagnosed with MS. And I truly believe to this day that that was triggered by the amount of chronic stress I was under from when I first grew my business. And I wouldn't change a single thing in perspective, because everything is either guiding you where you're supposed to be or redirecting you to where you're supposed to be. And now, like, I just wake up every day so extremely grateful, in almost disbelief that like, this is my life in this house with you as my fiance, with our kids, with our business, helping thousands of people across the world grow their business. And I have so much gratitude in my heart for that. And I know that wouldn't have happened in that way. And maybe not even like the way that we met had, you know, the life path before that not happened. And everything's a lesson. And so it happened again. And this is a story for another day, but 10 years later, I get, you know, a notice that we're getting kicked out. Yeah. But now I have the knowledge, the tools, and the resources to be like, no.
And someone to tell you just to relax.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it didn't happen again in that way. But, you know, especially in business, everything is there to teach us and guide us and make us. Opening a business is the best personal development event you could ever go through, honestly. But only if you see it in that way, in that perspective.
You mentioned about people growing up and not believing that they can have something because of how they grew up.
Yeah.
Like, the one thing I will stress to anyone who's listening is the circumstances that you grew up in were not because of your own doing, right?
Yeah.
So you have to know that you can, once you become 18 or 17, like you made the decision to become an esthetician, right? You can make that decision to change your life and change the trajectory of your life. But it all starts with a decision. Last two questions is, what's your favorite book?
Currently, my favorite book, I've had so many favorite books.
Well, what's your most transformational book, the one that had the most impact on your life?
There's been so many.
Name two.
Okay. I'm going to name a current one because currently it's my favorite, is 10X is Easier Than 2X. For sure my favorite.
Okay.
Think
about the esthetician who right now, who's listening to this, that is you, going through a very tough time, may want to quit and give up, may have negative feedback from family members. And they're trying to just get out of a rut. They don't have enough money to invest $1,000 into a personal development course right now, but they may be able to afford a $27 book.
The Slight Edge.
Okay. Who's that by?
The Slight Edge. I don't remember, but The Slight Edge.
Okay. The Slight Edge.
Or The One Thing. Those are both really good intro business books. And for honestly anyone, but The Slight Edge will get you in the habits of doing the right things to have that massive success one day.
And the last question is for anyone who is listening that has not taken BBB, why should they?
Because I learned a lot of things the hard way. Mm-hmm. So many more that like we didn't get a chance to talk about today.
And we will do another episode about
it. When I invested, it was the shortcut to success. And so like you can have the shortcut by investing in a program that's not only been proven by myself, but been by hundreds of other estheticians. Yeah. And I won't say who, but like, because some of them don't always say it, but there's been a lot of big estheticians on social media that have taken the program and have grown, you know, massively, have storefront locations, have team members, but they started as a solo esthetician who took BBB. And so I really think it's a foundational success program for any esthetician that wants to grow a successful business. And the investment that you make in it, you will get 100 times X that over the lifetime of your business.
And with that will wrap this up. Often imitated, but never duplicated. My beautiful fiance, Raya. Thank you. If you made it through all 3 episodes of this 3-part series and you loved it, please leave a review. On another note, if you have not signed up for our free masterclass, which is February 25th at 7 p.m., the link to do so is in the description of either this podcast episode or the video if you're watching on YouTube. What we're going over during the masterclass is how to make more money with the clients that you already have. Instead of searching on social media, trying to figure out how do I get more people in my door, you already got clients. The only thing is you're not figuring out how to maximize the lifetime value of that client. We're going to teach you how to do that. Raya figured it out. 3x star revenue, easy 3x star revenue. She's the #1 beauty business coach in the country, in the world. Who better to learn from than the best? We'll see you February 25th. Be there. Don't be square. I'm out.